Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberker. After a tumultuous 2018, the year 2019 proved to be a year of recovery and relative stability for Turkey's economy. The government launched a wide-ranging economic stabilization program that helped reduce foreign debt and bring down inflation. And now, as Mobin Nasir reports, the government is shifting its focus to boosting economic growth and creating more jobs.
The Turkish economy entered 2019 on nervous footing. The lira was recovering from its fall to a record low against the US dollar, and Washington was threatening another attack on the currency. The government took steps to reduce imports and stem the outflow of foreign currency, and the central bank raised interest rates to 24% to curtail inflation. The rebalancing exercise trimmed inflation from over 20% in January to 12% in November. Foreign currency reserves increased from $130 billion to more than $140 billion over the same period. But GDP growth took a hit, stalling in the first half of the year. Despite the slowdown in economic activity, Turkey is better positioned now than it was at the beginning of the year to meet its obligations to foreign lenders. And officials say the next phase of the government's stabilization program will revive growth and create more jobs.
Starting from the next year, we foresee and at least we plan to have a recovery process of 2 years, which aims to recover back to 5% growth rate. In order to achieve that, the fiscal policy side was also critical, and we can at least see that the central bank is also taking its steps according to these plans too.
The government's also making efforts to encourage more Turks to save.
We want to create an ecosystem for Turkish economy to have sustainable development, especially in capital markets, because the share of capital markets to the gross domestic product is really low in Turkey compared to emerging countries or developed countries.
Ankara hopes its efforts to mobilize savings will provide a cheaper and more reliable source of funds for local businesses and ensure that in 2020, the economy gets going again. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
And joining me now is Ozan Özkural, who is the CEO of Tento Capital Partners, and Ege Yazgan, who is a professor of economics at Istanbul Bilgi University. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you here. So 2018 was a volatile year for Turkish economy, especially when Turkish lira surpassed the rate of 7 against the US dollar after a diplomatic spat with the United States. But now things seem to have settled to a great extent, with international organizations updating their forecasts on Turkish economy and saying they're quite optimistic about 2020. So, Ozan, are you optimistic, and what is expected of 2020?
Well, thank you. I'm actually cautiously optimistic. And the expectations stem from two things. A, the way that Turkey and Turkish economy itself is trying to restructure itself around the difficulties that we've had, but also we don't live in a bubble. Therefore, we are part of the global economic and geopolitical landscape. And as long as the low yield environment in the world continues, and to that end, there is still $11 trillion parked in negative yielding assets in the world, investors will chase yield, will chase returns, and therefore emerging markets overall will be still in 2020 the darling of markets, if you will. Now, where Turkey stands within that is going to be interesting, because although money will flow to emerging markets, investors will be much more selective in terms of what risks they take. So perception becomes reality. So I think it's a great opportunity for Turkey, provided that we can manage perception.
Ege, give us an overall view of 2019 Turkish economic developments. Besides the repercussions of that currency shock, Turkey has faced difficulties. Tell us about the measures taken so far.
Well, actually, Turkish economy, the recession of the Turkish economy has already been over now. And we expect another strong positive growth in the fourth quarter of basically due to the base effect of the last year. So However, the question is whether the growth will continue and the recovery of the recession after the recession will be quick, as in the past experiences, like in the 2009 crisis. Turkey entered a deeper recession, and compared to this one, to the recent one, was the much deeper in terms of the output cost. But however, the recovery came very quickly, and then the Turkish economy started to grow again.
But to sustain that, do we need structural reforms?
Well, yes. The question is that that growth period, after the 2009 crisis, was basically driven the huge credit growth.
Yes.
So now the Turkey needs to, well, it's very unlikely this time to continue the same path by relying on the credit growth. So then, Turkey needs some sort of structural and other reforms to repeat the same path again.
Now the government is focusing to boost economic growth and creating new jobs. And then comes the direct foreign investment, which is very crucial for the Turkish economy. Ozan, tell us about the current situation and opportunities Turkey offers.
Look, that's a great and very important point, in that Turkey is now a top 20 world economy. So therefore, the kind of FDI, foreign direct investment, that Turkey needs to attract is not really hot money inflows, right? We're talking about what I always call a sticky long-term FDI, whether it's within real sectors or even if it's portfolio management. Investors, or we want to attract investors that think long-term. Now, what does that mean? We have to do some structural reforms. We have to underline the relative stability of dollar Turkish lira, because ultimately any investor globally that places money into any country, they tend to think in dollarized terms, right? So there's an element of FX risk that we have to manage, the perception of, and also create the right legislative landscape to allow investors to choose Turkey over different countries.
All right.
Now, what does that mean, just very quickly? And don't want to kind of cannibalize it, but the thing like the new, for example, Turkish-made car that is going to be revealed, it may sound local, but it allows investors to participate in Turkey in benefiting from technology transfer and know-how of what will dominate the global future growth of economy, which is, for example, battery technology, electric cars, so on and so forth. So as long as Turkey can continue to be at the forefront or a part of a club that is playing the long game, I think that will be a good point for investors to take a bet on Turkey.
Okay. So in the latest move to push U.S. President Donald Trump to take harder stance against Ankara, U.S. Senate committee backed the legislation to sanction Turkey for its purchase of Russian S-400s, as well as its northern Syria operation, Peace Spring operation. So tell us about how prepared Turkey is this time and how this will be different than the previous ones again.
Well, Turkish economy seems to be very sensitive of such kind of news, and especially the financial markets. Then, when such a news comes from U.S., and then we see some sort of volatility in the financial markets. However, when you look at the situation, this is all up to the. I don't want to summarize the whole thing, but it seems in the final end, it's going to come to President Trump, and Trump will pick up 5 of the probably the lightest ones, the lightest one, and then if the most economically damaging ones are not selected by President Trump, the effect on except the high volatility, but we will experience in such situations, we certainly experience some sort of volatility in financial markets. However, the net effect after the first round will not be so important in my guess. That's because if given the assumption that they are.
This will jeopardize the 10 billion targeted trade volume between Turkey and the United States?
I think it can do, depending on where they sanction. So if they limit the sanction into the defense sector, it's more kind of protected, right? if it does come to the financial sector, that will certainly impact it, although I don't think it's in the interest of the United States to sanction Turkey vis-a-vis the economic environment. But the point is, I think they have to, because if they don't, then they set in their mind, in the Senate, in the US, they set a very dangerous precedent from their perspective for other countries to go, for example, prefer S-400s versus Patriots or so on and so forth. It's much more local, political driven inside the US rather than anything else.
Just to punish Trump. Yeah. So Turkey, on the other hand, in an effort to diversify its economy, became an important part of the Belt and Road project. The first freight train arrived from China to Ankara on November the 6th, and Turkey renewed its Asia and New initiatives. So tell me, Ege, are Turkey's interests lie now in the East rather than the West?
Well, yeah, Turkey's interests are lying in exporting and restructuring its production overall. That means we cannot, given what I said earlier, this is a Turkish economic growth model should be changed to resume growth again and to make it sustainable for the future. So that means Turkey mostly should rely on external demand rather than internal demand, as in the previous period. So that is, of course, for Asia is a big opportunity for Turkish economy as well for restructuring it to make it more export-oriented.
Last comment from you.
I think Turkey, given our position, should look at all sides. We don't have to pick East or West, right? And it's entirely within our national interests to trade and have trading relationships with everyone in the world. So I don't think it's going to be an either or, but we have to place.
That's why we're talking about diversification.
Exactly, right? Why not diversify?
Reduce the risk.
All right. I'm afraid we're out of time, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight
Pleasure.
Talk. Appreciate it a lot. The 1990s were a traumatic time for the Balkans, where conflict and ethnic violence took the lives of thousands. Deep-rooted scars were not only left on people's minds, but also on the land itself. But now there's a push to reverse those divisions by creating a more interconnected region. One project is the Sarajevo-Belgrade highway, which will connect two countries that were once bitter enemies. And funding that project is Turkey, which is playing a big role in building up the region's infrastructure. Ömer Kablan has more.
It's been almost a century since the end of the Ottoman Empire, losing a vast amount of territory, including the Balkans. But today, Turkey continues to invest in the region. For more than a decade, Turkey has been working to create stronger economic and political ties with the Balkans. The government has also encouraged Turkish businesses to invest in the region. Earlier this year, during his visit to Serbia, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan attended the groundbreaking ceremony of the Belgrade-Sarajevo highway. The $3.5 billion project will be funded by Turkey and is being dubbed by Erdogan as the Peace Highway.
Ve bugün temelini attığımız köprüyü bir dostluk köprüsü olarak görüyor, sembolik bir değer yüklüyoruz.
Turkey is among Serbia's top 10 trading partners, with a trade volume of $1.2 billion and a goal of more than doubling this by 2023. And more Turkish investment has started to flow into the country. Turkish construction companies are building and will operate 20 power plants in Serbia, and Turkish-Serbian economic relations have started to focus on energy, as the Turk Stream gas pipeline, led by Russian energy giant Gazprom, will extend through Serbia by 2020. Trade between the Western Balkans and Turkey grew from $430 million in 2002 to more than $3 billion in 2016, with Serbia accounting for nearly 1/3 of it.
If you want to bring security and peace in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and if you want to protect the Bosniaks, the Muslims, you have to have a good relationship with Serbia.
Turkey is also Kosovo's third largest investor, with $340 million invested, most of it to buy an airport and power company. And over the last decade, it has been one of the largest aid donors. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, Turkish investments have been more modest, but its political influence has increased since the war in the mid-1990s. In terms of investment, Turkey is not among Bosnia's top 10 trading partners, but has a strong cultural influence on the country.
The soft power side of Turkey, it's quite visible, valuable, and quite well. I think it has been, received from the political elites on one hand, and the people or the citizens of certain or the Western Balkan countries.
And Turkey has been trying to cultivate those ties, especially through investments all around the region. When Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić visited Ankara in 2018 to discuss infrastructure projects and other issues, he described Turkey as the biggest power, the strongest country in the Balkans. And this is a perception that Turkey wants to realize. Omar Kablan, Straight Talk.
And joining me now is Marko Kadesh, who is the president of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Serbia, and Bayram Akgül, who is the chairman of the Turkish-Serbian Business Council. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you here. So for more than a decade, Turkey has been working to create stronger economic and political ties in the Balkans. And among these countries is Serbia. Now it is being dubbed as the rising star of the region because it draws most of the foreign investments into the region. So Marko, tell us about the progress made so far in terms of the two-country economic relations.
So I can tell just the numbers which are explaining themselves and your question the best. Only in last year and this year, there were 207 new companies, Turkish companies, opened their operation in Serbia. We have in last year and a half, 2 years, we had 20 Turkish factories manufacturing in different industries built in Serbia. So these are the numbers that are clearly telling the story about very good economic ties. And we have also very good political ties. So we have in 2017, 2018, 2019, more and more visits between the presidents, between the top leaders of our country, but also business forums. So there is no, and I'm like, last and this year we had 3 times, 4 times business forums together, and there is never less than 250 companies talking about their business. So this is something which is really, really, and if you just see statistically, I think when you see the last 2 years, there's no other country where the intensity is so growing in the economic relations like between Turkey and Serbia.
The current trade volume stands at $1.2 billion, and I think that both countries want to double it by 2023, right? Is it doable?
That's the clear goal. I think it is, because starting to also having Turkish investors in manufacturing sector in Serbia means also that this trading factor will grow maybe even more than if you don't have this kind of investments or your companies building your investments in our country. So on this side, I think it is doable. Of course, it will be very much dependent also on the global economy.
So what's in it for Turkey in investing in Serbia, and how significant is the funding of a highway linking Belgrade-Sarajevo?
Actually, Turkey and Serbia, when we work together in the history, we have always good success. So now with this political friendship, we need to, as a businessman, we need to use this advantage to build up long-term relationship businessly. So this highway is one of the biggest projects of that region, which can connect Turkey and that region, which is the key point for connecting Bosnia, also the other part of Serbia, which is Turkey is not only making Belgrade Sarajevo, Turkey also helping for Novi Pazar Tutin, which is the heart of the where is the Boshnak in Serbia living. There is also road, so connecting Turkey to do more business there. So we want to develop good relation with Serbia, for we can work together and grow together in Balkan, also in Russia.
So does Turkey see itself as playing a sort of mediator or peacemaker in the region?
Yeah, Turkey and Serbia, if we work together, we can be big peacemakers because we are key two countries for that
the
region.
Stability of
Yes.
the region. So, Marco, you're also the head of the Western Balkans 6 Chamber Investment Forum, which pushes, if I'm not mistaken, for regional economic integration and making the Western Balkans as one market of 18 million people, if I'm not mistaken. Was this initiative launched as an alternative to the Berlin process? Why did you need
We were
to
like a
find
part
such an
of the Berlin
organization?
process.
Yes, I know.
Exactly. We started to build this this entity, which is the regional chamber of commerce of West Balkan 6, actually together with start of Berlin process. So we founded the office, and we started with the office in Trieste 2 years ago. But
Whose
before
idea
that,
was it?
this was actually the idea, the initiative came from President of Chamber of Commerce Kosovo and myself. So we sit together and said, let us invite the people in the region, because there is no alternative if we want to build sustainable economies and growth just to unique our region a single market. This is something you can, that's not if we want to do that or don't want. The question is, are we able to do this? And if we are not able, I don't think that we have a good future altogether as economists. I think we are able, because also now the political leaders are, I don't know if you are informed, but there are new dynamics in the regional process. So between Albania, Northern Macedonia, and Serbia, and now also the three others with Kosovo and Bosnia and Montenegro. Hopefully to have all political leaders on board to build really clear steps and agreements which will allow, let's say, to a free flow of people, capital, and goods. And this is something which make us also as a partner for example, your companies, much more, attractive than only by country.
So we know Bayram Turkey has always been supportive of peace and stability in the region, and part of that strategy has been engaging in close cooperation with all countries as we see it today. Tell us about Turkey's policies in that respect. Do you believe it's raising some kind of eyebrows in Western Europe?
Actually, Turkey is on the very good way to do peace area of the Balkan, which because Balkan is our cross to the Europe. So we want to have strong relation with Balkan. We can grow together, because in Turkey we have also young people who can work, but in Balkan unemployment for young is also high, so we can grow together. For Europe also, Serbia have very good advantage at the moment. Until they are in EU, they have zero duty for Russia. It's also good for Turkish investors, which is something for us is important. If Serbian products export to Russia is zero duty.
So, if I'm not mistaken, it's quite important for Western Balkan nations to achieve growth required for reaching its full potential, and so as to become the member of the European Union. Serbia is expected to join the European Union in 2025, but that will come with a lot of baggage that you'll have to cancel on your bilateral trade relations with other countries outside the European Union. How are you planning to iron that out?
That's the part of the game. That's the part of the joining the EU. So you have to, if you join the EU at that moment, not before, but at that moment when you are becoming a full member, you are part of the custom union and you're part of the bigger system. So and you have the preferences that this system gives you. So all other free trade agreements that Europe has are also very good, that we don't have now. But now when we are not a member, our economy has to work, and we are really working. We have now about 1.3. We are reaching 1.3 billion people, different markets, Euro-Asian markets, Russia, Belarus, Armenia, Turkey,
and you're about to sign an agreement with Euro-Asian Union, right?
Which is
we signed
the FTA.
Belarus.
We signed a new FTA, which is actually more or less That's what we had with the three others, because when they joined in Euro-Asian Union, they had to make the new agreements jointly, free trade agreements. So it's more or less.
So you'll see when you become an EU member.
And this is part of, as we had with Russia. Now we have it with countries like Armenia or countries with Belarus. But mostly the free trade agreements is the same.
We're out of time, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk. Appreciate it a lot. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ayşe Süberker. If you've got any comments, do share them with us on Twitter with the hashtag Straight Talk. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.